I'm going to just go ahead and introduce our next speaker, which is now, right? Where's Monzero? Okay, so I'm going to introduce Kristen Seashore. Oh, good, you're here. Kristen is a program manager and life cycle team lead at GE Healthcare in Madison, responsible for supporting the installed base of premium anesthesia devices and managing projects to develop new anesthesia device features. There's a lot of mumbling. During COVID, she also supported the ventilator project efforts in Madison through a variety of global supply chain projects. She earned her BS in 2008 and MS in 2010 in biomedical engineering from UW-Madison. In addition to her day job, Kristen co-leads the UW-Madison campus recruiting team at GE Healthcare, where she oversees events ranging from career fairs to coffee chats. She also co-leads an annual GE Girls Summer Camp, which encourages 7th to 8th grade girls to pursue careers in STEM. And she is a life member of the Society for Women Engineers and Girl Scouts, and currently serves as a member of the UW-Madison Biomedical Engineering Department's Advisory Board. Thank you for all your service. That's amazing. Everything you do for us.
All right. I'm looking for some panelists. Yep, okay, there we go. All right, good afternoon. So we're going to start out first by having our panelists introduce themselves here. We're playing around with which mic is the best one, but I'll start with you, Darylise.
Hello, everybody. My name is Darylise Suarez Gonzalez, and I am an assistant teaching professor in the BME department. I joined the department in 2018 as a lecturer, so my role has been changing throughout. Now I also serve as the associate chair for the master's program. And before my professional titles, I was a grad student here with Bill Murphy. And it's been so wonderful to connect with the first cohort of PhD students from his lab. So I'm very excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Tracy Jane Puccinelli. I'm also an assistant teaching professor, and I've also taken a similar path. I started in the BME department in 2011, teaching BME design, and also teaching in what was then a first-year program called Inter EGR 160. Now I serve as the director of the BME outreach program, and I teach a variety of courses, including Introduction to Tissue Engineering and the lab portion of biological interactions with materials.
Hi, everyone. I'm Travelle Ellis, also alumna of the BME department. I got my PhD also in Bill Murphy's lab. Around the same time, we were all in grad school together, so we can have some stories later during speed mentoring. I currently work at Exact Sciences. I lead multicultural initiatives, and I guess you're asking, well, what is that? I started my career there as director of health equity, and I've now moved into this next role. And the idea is that as we think about individuals who need products and services from Exact Sciences, we want to make sure that all people are served in that way. So we make products that meet needs for people of different populations, different cultures, vulnerable or not, to advance public health.
All right. So we're going to start out, I guess, a question for all of you. So if you were to define inclusivity, what does that mean to you in your role?
I can start. You guys have probably heard the analogy, diversity is inviting people to the dance. Inclusivity is getting them on the dance floor. Equity is how much space they take up in the room. And then belonging is if they're then allowed to change the music. So if we think about everyone that has come here today, we've got you in the room, and we all come from different backgrounds, different ages, different perspectives. But inclusivity is allowing you guys to use your voice, have your voice mattered. Dr. Rodriguez talked earlier about, this idea of I didn't feel comfortable speaking up, but my insights are valued. That to me is inclusive. And to have inclusive voices heard, you have to have a culture that fosters that inclusivity.
Yeah, for me, in my teaching role, I think it's really, really critically important, especially with first-year students, that I provide a welcoming and inclusive environment. And a lot of you have talked about how important diversity is, and of course, we all agree that diversity is critical to solve the world's complex problems. And so day one, I express this to my students, and I think it's really important to retain those students at the first year. And it's not just the first year, but I think it's just so critical to get that message through to those first-year students and keep them.
Let's try these. Okay, yeah. Okay, no, these might be the
Okay, so my role, I do a lot of education as well, but for the sake of the panel, I'm gonna focus my responses more based on my role in the master's program and with the grad students. So in my opinion, inclusivity means how can we create an environment for everyone, and I'm going to highlight that word, everyone, and how can we make them thrive? And that's the other key word that I want to highlight because I think it relates very well to with what I do. So when I say everyone, we try to welcome diversity. And what do I do in my role to achieve that? Lots of different things. So we try to have presence in conferences that are more targeted towards underrepresented groups. We try to be present in larger BME conferences as well, with the idea of bringing a very diverse student population into our program. But then it's not just bringing them here, but what tools and what things can we do to make them thrive, make them successful, and have a good career path afterwards. So part of that, our programs, the master's program, I feel we cater different learners. So we have a program that it's more project-based, hands-on learning. So that targets probably a group of people that prefer that way of learning. So we have also more traditional or lecture-based content, research. So I feel like we do a lot of different things to allow students to be able to thrive. So one thing that I also feel we aim to do is with the master's program, we don't try to prescribe a set of classes, even though it's a short program. So we try to provide options so that everybody can build a plan that meets what they want to get out of this opportunity, of this investment in their education. And I think that's how I would define inclusivity in my role with the grad programs.
All right, so building on that, I'm going to direct this maybe to Tracy here. So what strategies or programs have been successful in promoting an inclusive and belonging environment in the undergraduate community?
Yeah, so we do a lot, and actually, Dr. Suarez is right with me with the first-year program as well. Back in 2017, when we first started this course, we began with things as simple as a team contract. So team building is really important. We've talked a lot about how you need to work successfully on a team to be a successful engineer. And that can leave some students marginalized. So we have to make sure that every voice is heard. So that was one of the first initial steps. Other things that we do, a lot of team building exercises. I also should mention that the very first day, I'm really privileged to have the opportunity to talk to every single one of our BME first-year students, either in the fall semester or the spring semester. And so that very first day in the lecture, I actually read our UW diversity and inclusion statement, and I make it really clear to the whole class that this is important to me. And I also make myself approachable, so I make sure that they know they can come to me if they don't feel included. And I revisit that. I say that repeatedly and in my lab section as well. Since every year we seem to add a new activity, a new initiative. This past year we added Clifton Strengths, how many of you have done Clifton Strengths? Oh, not that many actually. It's really interesting. There is a free version out there if you're curious. So it identifies top 5 strengths, and then we guide students on how they can be their own advocate and they can find a role so everyone has that role that is unique to them and their strengths. Because diversity, again, is really critically important. There are a number of other things that we've borrowed from, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? We can borrow from other universities. Stanford has what's called Stoke Deck, So if you're interested in your teaching out there, you might want to look into this. There's all kinds of different activities they've come up with, and so we focus on the ones for camaraderie, for example. And there are a whole bunch of other things that we do. I don't have time to go into everything, but we do assess it at the end of every semester. I want to say a big thank you to Sarah Hagan in the College of Engineering, because she collects all that data and helps us analyze that. And we identify weaknesses, especially in the area of welcoming, inclusion, and belonging. And we have a mid-semester and a final teamwork evaluation where we specifically ask students, do they feel they belong? And is their team equitable? And things like that. So we can quickly identify things right at the mid-semester if we don't already know, and try to solve that problem on the team. But then at the end of the semester, we can also make changes for the following semester. Real quick, one example that we discovered was that, and this came out in reflections that students write, that students who did not have English as a first language felt like they could not speak up on the team. And they were receiving lower scores on participation on the projects. There was a direct correlation. So we immediately came together as a group of instructors and came up with a list of best practices when you're evaluating team members, and to really be conscious of the fact that there could be somebody on your team that doesn't feel comfortable speaking up for whatever reason, including English might not be their first language. And we saw that disappear the very next semester, and it has not returned. So.
I guess similar question to you, Darlie. So you want to expand on, I know you started talking a little bit already about some of the inclusive and belonging things that you've done for grad students, but can you talk a little bit more about specific examples?
Yes. So I got to second that English is not my first language, and when I was a grad student, that was a barrier for me as well. And even the jokes, I didn't get many of them because, again, it was like I wasn't used to it. I didn't know what they even mean. I should be laughing, but I don't know what that is all about. So I mean, I can totally relate to that, and we try to help our students definitely, but that's also something that we have to live with it. Before coming in, I was telling Karin, I hope everything goes out of my mouth, pronounced correctly. So those things happen. Anyway, so I teach mostly undergraduate courses. So, and the one that Tracy has been alluding to, that's one that I'm also an instructor for. So we have all the activities that Tracy mentioned. But I would say more specifically, to not be redundant, so for the master's program, for example, we started last year attending the annual Biomedical Research Conference for minoritized scientists. So that's a new effort, and it's surprising. I mean, so that's a meeting that it's targeted for underrepresented students, and many of them did not even know that we have a BME program. So many of them did not know that if you have a degree, let's say in biochemistry, you can still pursue a degree in BME. So we were educating a group of students into, you have other options and you should consider us, and actually we were successful. So we're gonna be attending that conference again this year, and again, we're hoping to keep spreading the word, having visibility, showing to underrepresented students that there's also diversity in our department, so that they can feel welcome to hopefully join us. In terms of what we do, I mean, here with the master's students to help them thrive, I feel one thing is that we have to recognize that we're all different individuals, and we have different ways in which we perceive a problem, target something, the goals that we set to ourselves. So we try to do, I mean, not 100% one-on-one, but more short group advising, or more, in some cases, one-on-one advising, so that we can listen to what an individual really needs and wants to get out of the program, and help them kind of identify resources and move in that direction. So.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to put into context why this matters. So whether you're a student here now, or you're an alumni, or you're a faculty member, creating an inclusive culture is not only important for this moment in time, for what people are getting from the material you're delivering, but it's important for the future. So in the workforce, people have decision-making rights, right? So if they don't feel included, they're gonna leave. And so your top talent drains because they don't feel like I can contribute at the place where I work, or I don't feel that I'm growing here, and so I'm going to go to a place that allows me to grow. So that's, you know, when you think about the alumni that presented today, or the alumni in the audience, we felt included, we felt like we had a voice, we felt like we were the fabric of the graduate program or the undergraduate program, and therefore you create alignment. So I know that DEI is a tricky subject these days, but the point of people feeling included and then getting to a place of belonging doesn't go away even though the verbiage changes. And so the programs are important. The connectivity is important. Back to the potlucks that Willis started so long ago, right? It doesn't matter that what language someone speaks. People enjoy food. People enjoy culture, right? And breaking bread is important. And so when I think back to like my time as a graduate student here, we had the GERS community, which Darlise, Karia, and myself were all a part of, but it became a place of inclusion and belonging because we could be ourselves. And so I want to put it in the framework of like at Exact Sciences, while not everybody feels like they can bring their whole self to work, you want people to bring some of themselves to work, because if they don't, they're not productive, and we don't impact the world with these innovative ideas because our innovators are only putting in half effort, or they leave and go somewhere else where they can put in full effort, and then they take the brain drain. We spent a lot of money to recruit them. And so that's why I think inclusion matters. I think that's why this conversation is important, so that not only with our learners, but like in the real world, this doesn't go away. The second point I'll make is that the world is becoming more diverse. So if you look at the boomer generation versus Gen Z, or Gen Alpha even, some of our children, the ethnic racial makeup is very different. And so if we're innovating products, we're thinking about science and technology, if we don't get technology that people want to use, it stays on a shelf, it stays on a paper. And so we gotta think about who's gonna use our products today, but who's gonna use our products tomorrow. And if we don't think about cultural influences on products, language influences on products, can people read the packaging? Is there a bias against, you know, for example, I work in cancer. In the African American community, we don't want to talk about cancer. And so a lot of my work is, how do I overcome that barrier to make sure that that population is not excluded, or that market, that's a very serviceable market, we don't lose out on that business. And so to me, diversity matters both internally, but it also matters externally as you think about what you can do for the world.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to build on that a little bit more and say, so what next? How do you maintain that desire to keep building on inclusivity and diversity?
Yeah, so I think we start by thinking about ourselves. Like what is our sphere of control? So my colleague back there, Justin Kepsel, and I, when we were grad students, we started the Graduate Student Association. Do you remember that, right? And it was a lot of work, but it was important to, within our sphere of control, create a space for us in BME to feel like we belonged. And so whether you're in a student organization or you teach a class, like Tracy and Darlise have done, when you think about, like, as I lead my team, what is important to make sure that I maintain this culture of inclusivity? But not just like, oh, I did a program and checked a box, but I've incorporated into my strategy. So currently as a corporate priority, we have, as much as we can de-identify data, are we serving the populations we need to serve? We know that Native Americans and African Americans die really early from a preventable cancer. What are we doing to counteract that with our business? And so it becomes a business priority, it becomes a driver, it becomes something people care about rather than a nice to have. It's like, or it's the right thing to do, it's a strategic business thing to do.
All right, so I'm going to pivot a little bit we'll go back to either Darlise or Tracy. What strategies or practices have been effective for you at UW here in terms of attracting and retaining diverse talent, both from a student population, staff, faculty? I'll let either of you.
Well, I guess this probably plays into my role with outreach. So our senior undergrads are required to do outreach, thanks to Willis Tompkins there. And when I came along, I kind of cracked the whip on that requirement and made sure it happened. And in a very deliberate way, I have developed a seminar to teach our students best practices with K through 12 outreach in our community. I've also developed really great partnerships with area schools, especially schools that have a higher percentage of underrepresented minority students. And this is so that we can recruit and attract a diverse population. And some of these kids have never had opportunities like this, so it's a lot of fun. Our students embrace it. And it's hard to say if that's made an impact, but I don't know if we have the data, but things are a little better. They're not great. I'm not gonna say that by any means. There's a lot of work to be done, but it's definitely getting better. We have a more diverse group. We're now at somewhere between 52 and 55% female in BME, for example.
Yeah, so I do have some of the numbers. So at least comparing past years, so we'll say roughly 10 years ago, in terms of faculty, at least, we were about 42% female, with 16% minority. And now roughly flat, I'll say, so 46% female, 16% minority. From a student population, like you said, it's more of a shift. So the female-male breakdown back 10 years ago was about 1/3 were female and 2/3 were male in terms of undergraduate. Now it's closer to 50-50. And then in terms of minority, again, just from the undergraduate numbers, it was about 10 to 15% non-white identifying, and now it's closer to 25%. So growing, but definitely still room for improvement.
Yeah, I'm just going to add that when I was a grad student here, I was not officially BME, so I was material science, and in my cohort, I was the only female. So I've seen, since I've been in a different role in the program, I don't see that. So I see more of a 50-50 or close to that distribution with female-male ratio. And I mean, that was something that I did not experience. And I remember when in my first year as a grad student too, walking into classrooms in which I was scanning the room all over and I couldn't identify anyone that looked like me, Latina, and also, I mean, very, very few female presence in those classrooms. So yes, numbers, there's still room for improvement, but I feel like things are moving in the right direction and hopefully we'll continue in that trend.
So Travell, I'm going to pivot back to you more on the corporate side of things. So what are the strategies that Exact uses to grow future leaders who embody these principles of inclusivity and belonging? Yeah.
So this idea of culture and connectivity, so we now have employee resource groups, which are small communities based on affinity. We have one for members that, and you don't even have to be a part of this group to be a member. And I would copy paste that to here, right? We have one that focuses on individuals of the LGBTQIA plus community. And if you're an ally or want to learn more, you also can join that community. So it's not to like people feel othered or people to feel outside or I can't join, as much as it is we want to create a safe space for understanding, supporting, belonging. I think back in my day, I've been the recipient of minority scholarships and pathway programs, and I think those work, honestly. So in the field of orthopedics, because I went to med school, I had a little bit of visibility to this. The field of orthopedics, which is 6% female, I don't know if that number has changed, and 3% minority, without pathway programs, that 3% wouldn't exist. Right? And so I think that the more we can do to maintain the sustainability of these programs and diversify how we bring people in, the better. So as Tracy was talking about, upstream, getting more people exposed. But when we think about our hiring practices, just like for a clinical trial, are we excluding people before we even get started, right? Are we excluding people from jobs in the workforce or admissions to the university because of where they went to school? We've never heard of that school, or they have a comorbidity that's prevalent in their population, or they live in a certain zip code and therefore it takes them twice as long to get to work and therefore are not a candidate for our pool, right? So I think there's individual things we can do, but there's also system and process things that I won't say Exact Sciences is a perfect company, but companies are responsible for this as well, because that's how that culture shift happens. That's how that change happens. That's how we create a better workforce for Gen Z than we inherited, or that, that's how we move this needle forward.
All right, I'll see. Any questions from the group?
I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
I guess in terms of academia and industry, what's the best way that you guys have found for being able to advocate or like in terms of like treatment for underrepresented communities? Like I know some studies going on for like LGB and like Hispanic communities specifically, or like underrepresented communities that maybe have like they need more attention in a certain area.
Start. So my role was created to address those disparities. And it took a decision at the top, of course, to create funds and space to do that work. But I think a key component is realizing how many individuals or lives that aren't reached by excluding or overlooking, right? So if you take Madison as an example, right? It's a collection of, let's say, 10 zip codes. And if only 6 of them contribute to the University of Wisconsin, how are we serving our population effectively? And so therefore, carving out space and opportunity to then go to those 4 zip codes that aren't being served, understand why they won't or why they're not engaging, and kind of meet people where they are. That's the saying. Just like engineers, we solve problems. We got to go to the people who need the solution to figure out what the problem is. And so sometimes we feel like we know, but we were built on the Wisconsin idea. So instead of having silos and thinking we know the answer, let's go to ask the individuals that need services what they need. So in my mind, I know it sounds really simple, but honestly, that's how I approach my work, is I have a customer, I have an end user, I have a community that needs my help. They need my product, they need my service. But I don't know what their barrier is to understanding how to use my product. And a lot of times they just don't even know about it, or they didn't think it was for them, right? So I work for Cologuard, right? And so you guys have seen the commercials, the talking box. But I'll tell you the number of people, even in my own family, who don't think that box has something for them. And so if you think about your own science and your own innovations, how many people are you innovating for that may not even want to even know about what you're doing or designing? So I even think about your senior design projects, right? Like, keep that worldview or that community lens on those stuff that you're doing. I think it will really, really impact you as an engineer for the future.
Yeah, I would add one thing on the kind of academic setting. So we're going to try something new this semester, and essentially we're wanting to see more students interested in joining the program that are not UW students. So, for that, with that in mind, I feel like you have to make yourself available and approachable. And I will be visiting later this month UW Eau Claire and talk about our programs, talk what we do, the resources that we have, with the idea of bringing more people. In the 5 years of the program, we've only had 1 student. And it happened that I had connections, so I was able to make that path a little easier. But I feel like making yourself visible to other institutions that may not necessarily consider this as their first option, it's also one way of trying to build on that diversity and including others.
Yeah, so that's a tough question, because a lot of the data that I've collected over the years, it's very hard to figure out what are the right answers, who is being marginalized and why, and how do we fix it, and were we successful? Because the numbers are low, for one thing, and everybody's different. It's not always about race or ethnicity. There are whole other categories we need to consider. But some of the things that I try to do is make sure that I keep striving to reach out to the community, reach out to communities that are primarily underrepresented minorities. I recently have a new partnership with some prairie schools, for example, and their after-school program is primarily underrepresented kids. And last year we started a 10-week mentor program. Our BME students volunteered their time for 10 weeks working with these kids, and they made a huge impact. And I guess I feel like that's become kind of where I can hopefully make a difference. Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
Maybe some question that I typically see this in a lot of industries, like relies on metrics for the diversity, like it's kind of a little bit flat, it's kind of dry. How would you measure success alternate to that?
I'm interested to hear this answer.
I'm living this right now. This is why I'm laughing. So I think you can look at it a couple ways, right? So you can look at your metrics of who identifies by what group. And unfortunately, race, ethnicity is like just an easy cut to the data. But I might also add that some of these metrics are also related to how people perform. And in my mind, we don't necessarily just bring in people because they are of a certain race, ethnicity, but also because they're just a really good engineer, right? And so in a perfect world, we'd have a diverse group of engineers, scientists, and they'd be from all different backgrounds. And it wouldn't just be siloed to, okay, it's just that metric. That takes time, that takes nurturing, that takes intentionality. And I don't know sometimes that we give these programs enough time to then see through, right? When you invest in kids in schools, those kids are in 3rd grade, right? So they're not gonna hit college for another 10, 11 years, right? Or they're not gonna graduate from college in over a period of time. And so I think the metrics are hard because you can't just say, okay, what's then the return on my investment in 3 years? Because you're gonna say it's a negative. So I think you have to be fair to what you're looking to test to then have the metrics aligned to that.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to add one other thing too from my experience. Unfortunately, metrics are the best way, like the easiest way to digest a lot of data. And I think to Trevel's point, giving any program time to be able to see the fruits of your labor, that's the piece, at least in industry. I don't know if it is for academia too, but convincing those stakeholders, those investors, whoever they may be, that this is actually important and we need this, time to look at it. All right, other questions? I think we have time, maybe one more. Yeah. What are you hopeful about?
I'll start.
Just in general.
So my good friend, Dr. Puccinelli, had me do the Tong Distinguished Lectureship last November. And being a good friend, I of course said yes, and then I asked, what do you want me to do? But I'm inspired by you all, the next generation of engineers, right? So they gave us the data on the department, right? That, when Willis and Ray and Rob and Dr. Webster, sorry, they're all doctors, but I just can't, Dr. Webster's Dr. Webster, he wrote the textbook. When they started the department, right, they were intentional about this pre-med track, which then brought women in. It makes me sore when I go to the SWE banquet and everybody comes up to me and they're like, you're a biomedical engineer, I want to be a like the shift of it was 1 or 2 of us to now there's a cohort of women. I'm inspired by the innovation that the future brings. I'm inspired that the future is diverse and they have a diversity of thought, and they actually, you guys demand what you want. Like, you demand companies be on mission. And therefore it changes me as a professional of how I engineer my systems and programs to be more impactful, not only for you guys coming behind me, but for the world we're serving. So that to me is what drives me.
Well, I'm super hopeful and excited about the next generation of students. And I'm really grateful that every year I get to see the next new cohort of incoming BME students. And by the way, that's a multidisciplinary course, multidisciplinary beyond BME. We have civil, environmental, geological, and I take in all the undecided students. So it's a really, really cool opportunity, and I'm just hopeful that we'll continue this change, this positive change that we have seen. I'm not sure what to attribute it to, but I'd like to think, I'm hopeful, that I've had a little impact on that potentially, and all of us, especially in that first year program and beyond.
Yeah, I don't think I have a lot more to say, but yeah, I'm hopeful of the next generation. I mean, in my 170 section this year, I have exactly 50-50, which, I mean, in the past I've had so female to male ratio, so in the past that's not been the case. I've had only a handful of females because of the interdisciplinary nature of the course, so it's not just BME. So I want to see that. I want to continue see those trends. I want to continue seeing things being normalized a little more. So one thing that when it's time for course evaluations, I bring the topic of bias towards female faculty, because I want the next generation that it's in my class to not have to deal with that, and I'm hopeful that that's going to be the case. So, I mean, lots of things to look forward, and I feel hopeful. I feel like I've seen a good change or shift, and yeah, there's more work, but hopefully it will continue heading in the right direction as it is now.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we heard, just trying to recap some of the things that you guys said. I liked the way that Travell explained this at the beginning about what is the difference between diversity, inclusivity, equity, and belonging. And I think keeping those things in mind, especially as you continue your career, whether it's in academia or moving into industry, those are all principles that I think, the language may change, the wording may change, but I think it's a reality that we all live in. And ultimately, tying back, I think, to what Professor Williams said about starting with the end in mind, BME is designed to serve humanity, to serve people, and we are a very diverse bunch. And if we continue to keep that in mind as we go forward into the world, I think it helps us to solve problems that'll address the biggest or make the biggest impact on the world around us. So thank you.